Welcome to this week's episode on the Happiness Happens podcast. I am so grateful that you are here today, and we have such an amazing conversation in store for you. I think you're going to gain so much from Andi and all that she shares because we really tap into deep rooted spirituality. And those are my favorite kind of conversations. Plus, she's just such an incredible and vibrant human being that I really think you're going to absolutely love what we're sharing on the podcast today. I want to highlight one thing that we do talk about, which is this idea of the 5 elements. So we're talking about the 5 elements. So fire, earth, water, air, and ether, and how they're present within all of us and how we incorporate that balance of all of these different elements into our daily lives every single day. So I think that's going to be a super powerful realization or awakening for you, or just information if you've already heard of this concept before. So Andi Eaton Alleman is the founder of Wabi, a platform dedicated to new school approaches to radiant living. She serves as a soul strategist working with companies like Google and Pinterest and conscious brands and CEOs interested in fusing soul and spirit into work. She hosts the top-ranked wellness podcast, Your Woo-Woo Best Friend, which features practical conversations for attainable transformation. Her latest book, which we also talk about on this episode, is called Elemental, Nature-Inspired Rituals to Nourish Your Life. And it's available wherever you get your books. So I'll have the links for you in the show notes below. Okay, if you are ready to expand and to grow and to tap deeply into a soulful conversation today, buckle up because you're going to absolutely love this one. Let's get into it. Andi, welcome to the Happiness Happens podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm so happy to have you here. When you had reached out and we were chatting about, being on the podcast and the conversations that we could have and how, I guess, incredibly soul fulfilling they would be, I was just like, immediate yes. I love her energy and I need it on my show, and I need everybody else to hear it too. So thank you for joining me today.
My pleasure.
Amazing. So I like to kick off all of the conversations with one question because I feel like it really sets the tone for our conversation and get to know a little bit more about you. And that question is, what does happiness mean to you?
I love this question so much. It's such a beautiful way to start a show. So,
Thank
as
you.
I was thinking about happiness and what it means to me, I think there's so many things that can create happiness in our lives, but to me, it's truly about connecting deeply to the person that you are and having an opportunity to explore life through creativity, your personal creations, whatever that means to you, having the ability to be generous in how you're living, making an impact, and finding joy in all the little things along the way.
That's beautiful. I love this piece about creativity because I think that we live in a society today that doesn't really give us the opportunity to tap into that creative side because there is so much hustle and there's so much, be here, do this, jump to the next thing, immediately, go into something else. And I think it reminds us that we have so much power in stillness, which I don't know that we always
Yeah.
take the chance to look at.
Absolutely. I've been having this conversation a lot lately. And one of the things that has been really coming up for me a lot is the reminder of how we each have such potential to harness the power of ultimately just what exists on this planet when we take a step back from the hustle culture. So, like,
Mhm.
just think about like what it's like for you when you actually can like go and sit and watch a sunset. You mentioned stillness. When you can watch a sunrise or a sunset, I mean, you're like, you breathe deeper, you connect in a brand new way. It's like really hard to find somebody who's like feeling frustrated or angry after they've sat and like experienced a sunset because it just shifts something within you. So there's so many ways we can do that, but it requires us to get into that stillness place. And it's not like we can all do it every day, but when you have an opportunity to take a moment and give yourself that, it is such a it's such a door to our own creative nature, because as humans
Mm,
we're all creative people. We just are living lives that are really intense, and so we don't give
mhm.
ourselves, that opening of that door that often.
That's beautiful. I think that's a really key piece, though, that you just touched on when it comes to thinking about creativity in and of itself. Because, sometimes when you think about creativity, I know for myself, anyways, and you tell me what you think about this. I know for myself, when I think about creativity, I'm like, okay, it has to be me doing something. You know what I mean? It has to be like
Mm,
still like expending energy in some capacity. You know what I mean? And like putting
yeah.
something out there when that creativity that could be sparked within you could genuinely be from watching a sunset and watching the sunrise. Like I literally had this happen to me the other day. I was sitting the other night and it was literally Monday night. It was a few days ago. And I was sitting and I was watching the sunset and I was like, this is so beautiful. Like the sun is like fiery red yellow, you know what I mean? And like the sky is pink and like it is so beautiful. And then the next morning I woke up and I was driving to the gym like I always do. And I was thinking to myself, like, in this little moment of stillness, I'm watching the sun rise now. And it is so beautiful. It's such a great reminder that I don't know how to word this. Like, I want to almost say, like, what comes to a close comes back up again. Do you know what I mean? Like, even if
Yeah.
something closes or, some energy shifts or it changes, you have the ability to have that newness again, which I think is so beautiful.
Yeah. Oh, I love that so much. There's this concept called Wabi Sabi. It's basically the
Mm,
view or thought that there is beauty in everything, but there's specifically beauty in imperfection, and that it's kind of this aesthetic that everything in existence that is imperfect or impermanent or incomplete is beautiful. And there's kind of this like idea of the cycle of life within the concept of
yeah.
wabi sabi. I read a book many years ago. I can't even remember exactly the name of it, but it's kind of like the philosophy of wabi sabi. And that always stuck with me, that idea of like imperfection is beautiful, impermanence is
Mm,
beautiful, incompletion is beautiful, because that means you're still in process, and that's a
mhm,
really amazing place to be. So I love you saying that it's like something that's coming to a close is always opening again, or something that's opening will close, but then
mm,
there's this like rebirth and
mhm,
like regeneration always. And I think that there's that in inherently in itself is how creativity is born. There's a meditation I practice often, and it's called the meditation of creative infinity, and it's ultimately like that idea that like creation is never complete, and so we're always indefinitely always in creative flow.
mm.
When we allow ourselves to tap into that, then we can really like dial that up. And I just think that it's a really happy place to be.
That is so beautiful. Okay, so indulge me just for a second here because I want to go down this like rabbit hole. I have this like intuitive hit that I feel like we need to talk about this. So we have this idea that the creativity cycle never ends, right?
Mm-hmm.
One door closes, another one opens, something comes to an end, something is reborn, something comes to a close within yourself, and a new level up or iteration of yourself comes to fruition, comes to light.
Yeah.
I think that one thing, though, that can be a little bit challenging is trying to process that and know that when everyone around you does not vibrate at that frequency, and trying to get people to understand on a more soul fulfilling and deep level, it is very difficult to get people to understand that, I'm not just looking for the next best thing. Like, I'm not just looking for
Yeah.
grass is greener on the other side, or I'm not looking for, to burn it all down and to like restart again. Even if you do that too, like, that's fine. But like, I think there's a difference between, and it's so funny that I'm talking about this. It's 1:11 on the clock, my time right now. But I think that it's so interesting to me because we have this desire. I know I have this desire to just have this continuous growth and this really in depth, like fully lived experience and like heart that is completely cracked wide open. And that is really difficult when you live in a society that tells you that if you want those things, that you're always looking for something more and that nothing is ever enough, because that's not how I feel, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's just like the complete definition of like living an intuitive life. If you're living an intuitive life, you're going to
Mm.
constantly be evolving. You're going to constantly be transforming. And if you're living from a place of tuning into the egoic mind, while it's not wrong or bad, the egoic mind, it's going to keep you comfortable. And that's what
Mm.
its job is. Its job is like keep you safe, keep you from doing things that are going to like inevitably cause you to go burn things down, right? Because that's dangerous. Like, and
Yeah.
I'm kind of using air quotes and I'm saying that's dangerous. That's what the egoic mind thinks. It's like, don't go burn things down because then you're too close to the fire and that could be detrimental to you. So, I think from just a human, just in our humanness, it's like very natural for us to want to stay in that place because it is a
Mm.
safe place. And many people live in that place and it's absolutely good for them. And then there's folks that like have this moment of like deeper connection to an intuitive way of living, and all of a sudden it's like, well, my intuition is constantly encouraging me. It's like that wise grandmother voice that's encouraging me to try things, to
Hmm.
take a step on a path that might be a bit of a detour from what I've always done before. And if we're doing that, sort of walking the road of the detour and living that intuitive life, we're inevitably going to be constantly evolving, constantly transforming. And to someone who's hanging out more of that egoic mind space, they're going to be like, what are you doing over there? It's not safe,
Yeah.
that path you take. So,
Mm.
yeah,
I love that. I love that. And I don't know if you believe this, so just let me know if you do or not. But I feel like, there's all kinds of different timelines of our life that we could potentially be living in. You know what I mean? You make one choice
sure.
here, it takes you down a different timeline. You choose something else and it takes you down a completely different timeline.
Yeah,
How do you sort of get to that place of being able to be in alignment with your decisions, like knowing that those are the right decisions for you,
yeah,
and you're in alignment with those decisions and honoring everybody else around you, like everyone else is, around you is like more egoic mind because not everyone understands, right?
yeah,
And then also making sure that you're making the, because I don't know that there's such a thing as like bad or wrong decisions. I just think that there's
yeah.
different decisions. And so like I guess like my question would be like, how do you honor that space within yourself to like know that you're ready to choose a different thought or something different?
Yeah, it certainly can be really challenging, especially when people around you, you want to be mindful of how they feel and what they think.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes those have been people that
Mm-hmm.
have really supported you in big ways. So that can be challenging when you're like, oh, I actually need to go do this instead, or I need to try this. And I know it looks risky or dangerous to you, but I really am feeling called to do this. So I think what you said is really important. Like getting into a headspace of a mindset of understanding there are no wrong paths. That if you choose something that inevitably implodes on you, because sometimes you will, like sometimes that will happen, that there was a lesson in that for you, and it is inevitably going to make you wiser for it, and perhaps next time you will choose something that is
Something different.
better for you. And again,
Yeah.
it's like what is really better or worse. But there's this
Mm.
there's this concept I love. It's the concept, and I had a mentor share this with me when I was like in my early 20s and like my very first big job. It's the concept of failing. It's called fail fast forward. And so it's
Mm.
basically like embracing that failure will move you fast forward. So getting really comfortable putting yourself putting yourself in a position where you may fail. And if you do that enough, you're going to fast forward your life into places that take you into that higher timeline. But you have to be okay with having some failures along the way, because
Mm.
that is going to help you to stay on that trajectory of moving to that higher timeline. So, I think like in my life, when I've made big decisions that were scary, or I was like leaving a corporate job that I was making six figures to do, I don't know what, like that was kind of where I was at one point in my life, and explaining that to like parents, close friends, a boyfriend, like, no, I'm really going to do this. And they're like, what's the next plan? And I'm like, oh, I actually
Mm.
don't have one yet, but I'm going to give myself space to find one. Like, they're like,
Mm.
have you lost your mind? And to me, that gift I had to give myself was that idea that it's okay if I fail, because I probably will at some point in this process. And that failure is going to hopefully put me onto the right path for me. It's going to like send me down some unknown direction that I don't even know is coming yet. And as long as I'm good and I can meet my basic needs, it's okay to have that failure happen. And then like going back to those people and saying, hey guys, it's going to be okay if I like screw up a little bit. It's going to be okay
Yeah.
because I'm going to be able to take care of myself. And I appreciate that you love and support me and want me to be safe and good and well. And I'm okay with trying some things and
Mm-hmm.
figuring out what is going to be next for me.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for getting
Okay.
my back, and I'm good.
That is really, really, really good advice. And I think it's a really good reminder for our listener right now, because I had the exact same, well, very similar experience when I decided to leave corporate and go into my business. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I left corporate that was supposed to be a very, very safe job. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And then the world shut down and that safe job became no longer safe anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so it shifted my entire perspective of what I thought stability and safety looked like. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're told your whole life growing up that stability and safety looks like X, Y, and Z. And this is what you should do. And so it makes you wonder, it made me wonder at that time, how many more shoulds am I living right now? You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like, where in my life am I living on somebody else's story or vision or perspective of my life and like what I should be doing every day? And I'll never forget when I left my job, my mom was like, "Oh my God," she's like, "This, I don't know, Simona." She said, "This is a very scary," and I was just like, you know, I would, and I say this all the time, I would literally rather work like 16 hours a day for myself and ever step back in
Yeah.
corporate ever again if that's what I
Yeah.
had to do to make it work, which I don't do that, but you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
and there's, like, something within that, like, whether or not you are working 16 hours a day for yourself, for you, the creativity and the expression of self that you are getting to have in building your own business, like, that is
Mm.
happiness in itself, and so there's a reason that you're
Mhm.
like, "I'll do this for 16 hours a day if I have to, because this is fully me expressing myself," and there's, like, a lot of joy in that. So, like, when we're building a
Totally.
business and we're doing our own thing, even though it's scary and there's like lots of ways we could experience challenges that we would never experience in a corporate environment, but that like expression of our gifts and our talents and like doing our thing, there's so much joy to be found in that.
That is so true. And I think that what you were saying earlier on in our conversation, you were talking about this idea of like hustle culture and all that kind of stuff. And I think
Yeah.
that we've created a way of living that is very hustle culture.
Yeah.
And at the same time, like I get this a lot because like some days in my business I do have to work longer hours. Like I don't
Sure.
work 16-hour days like on a regular, but like sometimes I have to work 12 just because there's a deadline and something is due. But like
Yeah.
I would do that 100 times over and that feels good for me. You know what I mean? And it keeps me
Yeah.
in flow. It keeps me in a creative space. I think there's a difference between hustle culture that leads to burnout and then this idea of creating something in your life that fuels you and brings you fulfillment. There's a difference for me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that is so true. It's so real. And yeah, I think, you have to be of a certain you have to have a certain gumption to
Mm-hmm.
become an entrepreneur, and especially when you are one who is led in a intuitive way, in a soul way. It
Mm-hmm.
can sometimes feel a little bit non-intuitive to like go into business if you're like really
Yeah.
tap deeply into soul and self-expression. But the reality is a business is a beautiful place to create.
Mm.
And then also, we live in a society where you have to have money to like exist. Unfortunately, that is just how it is. So when
Yeah.
you can take that expression of self, your creative gifts, your talents, and what your soul purpose to be, and infuse that into something called business, and then also inevitably take care of your life that way, that can be a
Mm-hmm.
really amazing place to be.
Mm-hmm. Do you see this a lot in your work? I mean, you're a soul strategist and you work with big companies like Google, Pinterest,
Hmm.
like, you know what I mean? Do you see this in your work? And how do you help people sort of identify these patterns within themselves and ways to shift them if appropriate or how appropriate? Take us down that path for a second.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, so I feel really fortunate. I get to work with people at all levels. So I started in a corporate environment. So I was working for a beauty brand that is owned by Estee Lauder. So, I was like in rooms with suits all day long, like wearing high heels, wearing my my
Yes.
black dress suit. I like lived that life. And I had an intuitive healer tell me once. She was like, "Do you know that when you go into those rooms, you're practicing a little bit of witchcraft?" And I was like, I would definitely not have called it that, but I think what I do really well is I tap deeply into what someone's purpose may be and why they have shown up here today, whether that's in a boardroom or whether that's in like a mentorship conversation that I'm having with one of my clients who's an artist or a creative dreaming of making money via their passions. So I think like that's the skill set that I have, is being able to help people identify purpose. And that could be a CEO in a corporate
Mhm.
environment. It could be a team of creatives at a company like Pinterest, or for Google, for example. One of the projects I worked on with them was putting together a series of educational videos for aspiring internet entrepreneurs, so mostly
Mm.
bloggers, people that want to make a career out of blogging. And so
Yeah.
what did that look like? It's like a lot of mindset work, it's a lot of strategy work, but it's really like, do you truly believe this to be fulfilling a purpose that you have? If you do, then you will do everything you can to get into a headspace, into a strategic place, into a flow in which you will be inevitably successful at this. And so, whether it's like creating something like that or having a conversation with a client who wants mentorship and guidance as they launch something that they've been dreaming of creating, that's ultimately my intention, is to help you to get really dialed into that purpose and then give you all the tools that you may need to help you be as successful as possible in doing that thing.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And I think that's something that definitely corporate misses. You know what I mean? I've worked for a
Yeah.
lot of different corporations. Same thing as you, in the fact of like, you walk in with your heels and you're this and you're that. You got to go sit in the
Mhm.
meeting and you don't believe all the stuff that they're saying. And you're like, oh my God, I roll. Like, you know what I mean? And it's
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, like I don't believe in, not even don't believe in half the stuff that they're saying, but it's just like, I found myself towards the end of my corporate career, I found myself just kind of sitting there and being like, why do you guys care so much about this? It's like so much drama for no reason. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
why does this need to be so dramatic? Like, it just does not need to be this way. And I just found it really interesting that, like, I think that there's like that shift in consciousness that kind of happens when you're
Yeah.
like, do I really want to be putting my energy into this? Do I need to
Yeah.
have my energy showing up like this in order to create? You know what I mean? Or can I tap into something that might feel a little bit more in alignment, a little bit more in flow, so that you
Yeah.
can create from that place of purpose, like exactly like you're talking about?
Yeah, I did at the beginning of the year. I spoke to a group of sales executives for a beauty company, and the VP of sales was like, "We want you to come in and do kind of like a dream life workshop. We want you to
Mm,
get our sales team to think about their dream life, and ultimately, we hope that a part of their dream life is that they are really excelling here in this company, and
right.
that this company, them being a part of this company, helps them to achieve whatever their dream life may be." So I was like, okay, so let's do this. So I do this workshop. And what comes up in the workshop for quite a few of the people is that there's this like, the folks that are sharing, they're sharing like, I want to go to Scotland, I want to go to the Caribbean. One of the guys was a videographer. He's like, I want to get a brand deal with Nike someday. I love sports, and today I shoot beauty campaigns, but wouldn't it be cool? And so I was having a conversation with the VP of sales afterwards, and I was like, okay, so what is important now is that you have heard what is truly going to light each of these people in this room up. And you've got to now go and, like, you've heard their hopes and dreams, you've heard them talk about what they believe their full potential to be.
Mm,
So for you to be the best manager of this team right now, you've got to go and honor what they've all talked about. So when you're
I
having a
love that.
sales conversation with them 2 weeks from now, the woman who said, "It's my dream to go to Scotland," you've got to bring that back to, she wants to go to Scotland. That's her dream life. How can she, in this company, create in a way that gets her closer to that dream? And if you don't speak about that with her ever again, she's going to think you never heard her to begin with.
That's
And
right.
you're just lessening the time that she's going to be with you. And if she's someone you really value, that's important. And so when I go into corporate environments now, because I felt like that was very much something I was missing in my corporate days, that's what I really want to help companies with, is how do you inevitably create better company culture by infusing more of that creativity, spirit, soul, purpose into how you show up with your teams.
That's really, really key. And as an employee, you know what I mean? Sitting on the other side of that,
Yeah.
you spend so much time at work. You know what I mean? You
Yeah.
spend most of your day sitting in an office potentially, or, commuting, or if you're lucky, you work from home. I say lucky because I would prefer to work from home, but
Yeah.
you know what I mean? And so you spend so much time somewhere. Why would you not want to be fully seen, heard, and honored? And I think that goes for corporate. I think that goes for business. I think that goes for relationships, romantic relationships, friendships, people you meet on the street. It's like this more conscious and like tapped in way of living where you're
Yeah.
honoring the person in front of you instead of trying to like, you know, create something that may not be in alignment, if that makes any sense.
1000%. Yeah.
Amazing. Amazing. I want to talk really quickly before we sort of wrap up our conversation because you talked a little bit about fire earlier. And I
Yeah.
want to talk about these five elements. And if you could take us through all five of them just super quick and kind of how
Yeah.
you can integrate them into your life, maybe every day or in different moments of your day, or how you see that and envision that for people.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So I have a new book out. It's called Elemental, and it's full of rituals that are all about supporting this radiant, creative, really tuned in way of living, this intuitive way of living. And so I broke the book down into the five elements: fire, earth, water, air, and ether. And in the book, I talk about the energy that each element holds and how to incorporate a balance of each of those into your daily life. And so the intention of the book is to be just a really fun place to go and find rituals, practices, exercises, journal prompts, affirmations, whatever it may be for you that you need to help you just dial in a little bit further to your most radiant self. So the five elements. So fire energy is dynamic, it's passionate, it's heartfelt, it's where creativity lies. It can also be restless and irritated and angry. So it's, if you start to notice those energies that are kind of on that darker side and you want to transform those, like you're feeling irritation and anger, well, let's think about how to transform that feeling into passion and creativity. And so there's
Mm,
practices in the book for that. Earth energy is rooted and material and sensual, it's tactile. So there's practices in the book and recipes too, all around connecting into those energies. Earth is also just like the energy of beauty and aesthetic. So if you're creating something, for example, in your business or as an artist, tapping deeply into earth energy can help you to really tap into that like sensual nature that you inevitably have.
mm,
Water is mysterious, sensitive, emotional, devoted, and there can also be some really beautiful creative flow and water practices. So if you're really thinking about how to, like, let's say you're wanting to create something that's like tapping deeply into your emotional self, doing water practices can be really, really great for that. Air energy is conceptual, it's communicative, it's cerebral, it's mercurial. And then ether is kind of the absence of all. It's the
mm,
cosmic energy. So it's like whatever fire possesses, ether has the opposite of that. So if fire is full of dynamic kinetic energy, the ether energy is like that space, that
mm,
cosmo sort of star space where there's like it's all dark and quiet. So anything that the other four hold, ether's going to hold the opposite of that. And so when you think about ether, it's really tapping into a more kind of like cosmic, infinite wisdom sort of space. So yeah, so the book gives you lots of ways of connecting to each of those five elements, and you can do so by There's actually a quiz in the book that'll kind of help you to find like which
Mm.
practices are good for you. But you can also think about your astrology or
Mhm.
Ayurveda or even the climate that you're living in and choose your practices based on all of those things too.
Beautiful. I love that. Oh, this has been such an amazing conversation, Andi. Thank you so much for joining me. And I do have one more question for you. It's a
Yeah.
question that I would love for you to also share where my listener can find you so they can connect with you. But I do want to ask you this question first. And I've been asking it for 3 years on the podcast at this point. I never really get the same answer, which I'm intrigued to hear what yours will be. But it's, how can someone create a little more happiness in their day every day starting today?
Mm. Create a little more happiness in your day, every day starting today. I think just taking a moment throughout your day. You don't have to go to the gym to move. You don't have to go to the grocery store to reset what you're putting in your body. You don't have to quit your job and burn it all down to feel a little bit different in how you're working. So just taking a moment to do a thing that will make that shift for you. So,
Mm.
for movement, if that's just like taking a second and dancing in the kitchen, for eating a little bit healthier today, if that's like making sure you drink a little bit more water and add something green to your plate tonight, and work, if that's just being a little bit more transparent about how you feel with what your present workload looks like when you're having a conversation with a boss, perhaps. Those are things that we can do every day to create a little bit more happiness that we do not have to wait until tomorrow to do. So I think just taking it moment by moment and implementing things that will lead you to a more radiant life along the way.
That is incredible advice. Thank you so much. And where can
Yeah.
our listener find you so they can learn more
Yeah.
about
So
you?
you can find me. My blog is Wee Girl. We have writers, educators, lots of just really incredible people that are contributing to that blog today. So it's OUIWEGIRL. You can also find me at Wee Studio, OUIWE Studio, and we've got all sorts of courses, retreats, free resources for living a more radiant life. And then you can get the new book, Elemental, pretty much anywhere you pick up your books, Amazon, Target, Barnes and Noble's, Borders, or if you like to shop local, if your local bookstore doesn't have it, they can certainly order it for you too.
That's wonderful. Andi, thank you so much. I will have all of the links in the show notes so that everyone can connect with you.
Thanks for having me. It's been such a pleasure.
It really has. And thank you so much for listening to today's episode on the Happiness Happens podcast. Thank you so much for being here and connecting with both of us. Feel free to send us a message. Let us know what you liked about this conversation. If you're listening, take a screenshot on social media and tag us both so we know that you're listening to our conversation. And that's pretty much it. So thank you, Andi. Thank you so much for listening to this episode today. And remember that happiness happens when you're least expecting it.